sobering in the United States because Saturn is turning direct on the 27th of November. Let's get into it. My name is Michelle. Welcome to Realization Hub. And today's energy update is about Saturn stationing direct in Pisces on November 27th at 25 degrees of Pisces. First of all, let's start with Saturn. Yeah, Saturn is a planet of responsibility, commitment, doing the hard work. You can think of it as building structure in your lives, putting up boundaries in your lives, the type of hard work that you put into your life, internally or externally, where you are doing it for the long-term results, the long-term rewards. It takes time. Saturn is a planet that can bring restrictions and delays. It can bring up topics of mortality. It can bring up real, serious hardships in our lives. But those hardships act like lessons from Saturn. Lessons that ask us to mature, grow up, take on more responsibility, work harder, put in the work, show up consistently, and commit. Now, Saturn, you can think of Saturn as a big, grumpy grandpa kind of teacher. I actually love Saturn. I have a lot of Saturnian experiences because I'm a Capricorn rising. And so Saturn is my chart ruler. So I know all about Saturn. But Saturn is like a big, grumpy old teacher. What I love about Saturn is that it has this type of intelligence to it regarding our times, our timing, our timelines, the timing of our lives, and what needs to be built, the work that we need to do at certain times of our lives. It has this, you can think of it as like a planet that is aware of our legacy in our lives, what we're overall building in our lives. It's like the architect of our lives. Whatever we need to put in place, like the systems in our lives, the foundations in our lives, what we're embodying in our lives, how we're maturing and growing in our lives, that's all Saturn. And so I love Saturn because whenever you're having a transit with Saturn and Saturn is aspecting one of your planets, you get this information coming up in your lives. It might not be fun information. It's definitely not light and playful information. It can feel really sobering. It can be like a hardship. It can be like a, a very difficult time, that's depressing, that's gloomy, that's harsh in some ways. It can definitely feel very, very difficult when you have a conversation with Saturn in your life. But if you're aware of Saturn, you're aware of the benefits that Saturn bring, and you know how to discern what's happening in that hardship, and you know that, oh, I'm going through a Saturn transit. This is a time to lean in to hard work. This is a time to lean into commitment, lean into responsibility, lean into embodiment, lean into boundaries, lean into doing the work. Then by the time Saturn finishes that transit, you will have some long-term rewards, some results in your life that you built, that you embodied, that you did over time. It takes time to go through those lessons with Saturn. And Saturn has been in Pisces. It's currently in Pisces. It was in Aries this year. It was in Pisces. It was in Aries. It's went back into Pisces, and it's going to go back into Aries next year. But Saturn went into Pisces in March 2023, from what I remember. And that's when Saturn's journey through Pisces began. Now, Pisces is an energy that's It's a mutable sign. It's very flexible and adaptable. It can be ungrounded because of that. And it's also a feminine sign. It can be very psychically sensitive, highly psychic, especially to collective energies. And it can be very empathic. It can be like a psychic sponge that absorbs energies from other people, from the environment, from the collective. It can be very psychic about the collective. It can really feel the collective. It's also a very spiritual, mystical sign. It can be connected to the astral realms and what's happening in the astral realms. And it's a sign that's very creative. A lot of people that are actors and actresses and photographers and artists, oftentimes they have strong Pisces influence. So it's a very creative, spiritual, mystical sign. And, on the positive end, that's someone that can be visionary or like a dreamer or creative, a very spiritual, mystical person that knows how to trust, a higher source of power in their lives, really go with the flow and trust something higher that's guiding them. But on the shadow side of Pisces, we get people that get a bit lost in fantasies, people that get disconnected and ungrounded, spiritual bypassing, people that fall into delusions and illusions, and people that are veiling the truth, veiling what's real. And when we have something like Saturn moving through Pisces, it can be like an old grandpa moving into your house and pointing out a lot of things, pointing out where you have been delusional, giving you a reality check. And that reality check doesn't feel so good. It feels like someone's popped your bubble. And usually, when you go through some type of disillusionment experience where you're coming out of delusions and illusions, it can be sobering, it can be maturing, right? When we have those reality checks, suddenly we can't escape anymore into fantasy and we can't spiritually bypass anymore. We have to really do the work to embody what we know spiritually in the physical. There's a lot of embodiment that has to occur with Saturn transiting through Pisces, spiritual embodiment. And we also have, Pisces, having difficulty with a lack of boundaries. Pisces is very, very open, very fluid, sometimes very ungrounded. So Saturn acts as like a grounding cord, like a grounding anchor in our lives. We got to actually show up grounded. We can't just escape and go into la la land and daydream all day long. We actually have to, be a bit consistent, which is a little bit difficult for Pisces because Pisces is very mutable. It's very adaptable. It's transitional. It's, has to show up more like a fixed energy, like a fixed sign. It has to be more consistent, be more stable, be more grounded. And that's a bit difficult for Pisces. And Pisces is an emotional sign. It's a feminine energy. And so we have to look at maturing emotionally, maturing spiritually. Where is our feminine energy need to mature? Where are we dealing with authoritarian structures in our feminine energy that we need to dissolve and become more sovereign? That's like spiritual maturity, where we're dissolving spiritual hierarchy in our energy and in our astral realms, and we're embodying spiritual sovereignty. It's a type of maturing process as a spiritual being, becoming more sovereign, no longer enabling this delusion of spiritual hierarchy and spiritual authority being outside of you. That's a type of spiritual maturing that I think we have all gone through on a collective level. And, there's maturing emotionally as well. And a part of maturing emotionally is recognizing where we have um, been too self sacrificing, where we've acted like a martyr and glorified that in some way, when actually you're just self sabotaging, or where you overgive. You allow people to take advantage of your compassion, your forgiveness, your patience, those old soul tendencies. Where you need to make boundaries with your empathy and compassion. Especially, we see themes in the collective about narcissistic abuse, and that, when Neptune went into Pisces like 14 years ago, sometime something like that. I'm not sure exactly the amount of years, but about 14 years ago. During that time, the topic of narcissistic abuse became very hot, and people had to contend with being empaths, the whole empath narcissistic dynamic. And a part of Pisces going through a maturing process on an emotional level and on a spiritual level is, in my opinion, like recognizing where you need to have emotional boundaries, um, where you need to have emotional boundaries with your own emotions, where you're like, venting and spilling your trauma all over the place, where you need to have internal boundaries, and where you need to have external boundaries, and where you need to have spiritual boundaries, spiritual boundaries with entities, narcissistic entities, karmic entities, the way people interact with you spiritually, like psychic abuse. That's a little bit more Scorpio, but hopefully you get my drift. Anyways, Saturn in Pisces has been teaching us a lot. And if you've been leaning into the hard work, if you've been doing the work emotionally, spiritually, then when Saturn turns direct and starts moving forward in the late degrees of Pisces, we're really going to see some of the fruits of our labor. We don't see immediate results with Saturn, but over years, we start to really see the results of our hard work, and that can be very rewarding, having those long term rewards. So, back to Saturn and Pisces. Saturn in Pisces turns direct, and when it stations direct, that's the most potent energy of the planet Saturn. So that energy of Saturn becomes very strong. So I think it's interesting that it's happening on Thanksgiving in the United States. Saturn, that Saturnian energy, is going to be very potent and strong on Thanksgiving. And yeah, that just makes me think that Thanksgiving might have a collective tone to it that's heavy, that's sobering, that's critical, maybe harsh on some level, cold or dry. And there's a lot of things I could say about that and why that's happening. We've been through a lot over this past month, especially during Mercury retrograde. By the way, Mercury will turn direct on the 29th, 2 days after Thanksgiving. So back to Saturn stationing direct, when I'm looking at that energy collectively, like, I think we're going to see where we've all been cleaning up a lot of karma. We've all been cleaning up a lot of karma, and we're ready to move forward again. It's kind of like if Saturn moved in to your house and started pointing out all the junk and all the issues in the house, like, oh, you've got a rat infestation over here, you got mold growing on the walls over here, your plumbing is leaking, your floorboards are broken, you've got crap you need to clean out that you don't need. And during the whole retrograde, Saturn is helping you to clean out the junk, repair the pipes, do the actual work to get the results that you need. And now, as Saturn stations direct, it's like having that empty room. Like, everything's been fixed. The room is now empty, and now we need to do the work of repainting the room, designing the room, putting new furniture in the room, embodying what we're going to embody with this new space that we've cleaned out. Right. So Saturn, when it goes retrograde, it's like cleaning out house. It's like getting rid of the junk. It's like getting rid of the karma. It's like where we're confronting our karma, where we're confronting the stuff that we need to work through. And so when it stations direct, collectively, I see that as a turning point where we're like, okay, now we need to start moving forward on this. And what I see us moving forward on collectively, there's been a lot of stuff about cover ups, cover ups with authority figures, public figures. There's been the Epstein emails that came out during Mercury retrograde, where now Congress in the United States has gotten approval to release the Epstein files. And as I'm recording this, they've delayed that by opening an investigation. But nonetheless, we had some kind of confrontation on a karmic level with sex trafficking and authority figures that exist in the government, that goes beyond the U.S. government, that goes into, other powerful people. So that happened. That was like a karmic reckoning that happened during Mercury retrograde. And now Saturn's going to station direct. And a part of what I see about Saturn stationing direct is this moving forward around things that are being covered up, things that are being purposely kept secret and hidden from us. All of that starts to move forward. So we'll see what that looks like in the collective. And then the other thing that I'm seeing, which I think is going to be maybe hitting the headline news on Thanksgiving, has to do with, when I'm looking at the energy, it's kind of looking like it has to do with maybe our military, the military, something about the military. And, collectively speaking, there's been a lot coming up around Mercury retrograde around the military. There's of course been the military getting orders, and then there's been a lot of encouragement around the military doing, following the Constitution and not following illegal orders. And that came up during Mercury retrograde. And then, of course, there's this kind of escalating thing happening with the U.S. Military in Venezuela. And, when Saturn stations direct, I'm at least seeing something that looks like fighting energy. So I don't know if that's like everyone goes home, they see their families, and everyone's just fighting with their families, fighting with their friends, like being really critical of each other's, beliefs and foundational values in life. Like, I don't know if it's just like this metaphor for like a lot of fighting that's occurring during that day, a lot of debating, a lot of fighting, like blowouts that are happening on Thanksgiving while everyone goes to visit their family members. Or if that's actually like an issue that's going to, take up our attention, something that happens, a decision that's made, something, that continues to progress in the story around our actual military. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how that plays out, but I'm just kind of sharing what I saw energetically, in case it's very literal, like it literally has to do with our military. That kind of stuff does fall under Saturn, because Saturn is all about hierarchy and systems, and the military is a system. It does have its rank and hierarchy. So it does kind of fall in line with that energy. It could be very literal, like that, or it could be more metaphorical, where it's like, wow, there's a lot of in, harsh, critical kind of fighting going on, like um, grumpy kind of fighting going on that day. So just be aware of the 27th, because, when Saturn stations direct, it can be very potent. And so we can all feel kind of that grumpy, critical energy in the air. So just be aware of that. Um, I want to mention that it starts to turn direct. And for all of us that have been doing the work, especially for those of us that are going through spiritual transformation, you're going through spiritual evolution, your experience might be very different than the collective experience. Maybe you visit friends for Thanksgiving and you have a beautiful day, and, instead of feeling that critical, harsh energy, you're enjoying all the hard work you've put into making connections and having authentic connections with friends or family, like, so your experience as a conscious being um, is going to be different than an experience of someone that's just moving through their lives disconnected from their self awareness, right? So, for those of us that are going through a spiritual transformation on a more personal level, I actually see Saturn stationing direct as a very validating experience, where you can kind of look around at an area of your life and say, like, I am so thankful for all the work I've done. I'm actually seeing results. Like, I'm getting some good results. I'm seeing the fruit of my labor. Like, I'm seeing things starting to come together. Like, I still have some work to do around this, but like, dang, like, I'm starting to see those results, right? And it could be around what you've been embodying, it could be around spiritual maturity and your spiritual sovereignty, and like, it could be around all this karmic clearing that you've been doing. It could be around emotional maturity and becoming more um um working through like a trauma, or working through a pattern that you have on an emotional level. It could be around boundary making and stepping into your own spiritual authority. I mean, just kind of look at the past 2.5 years, since March 2023. Look at that area of your life that's ruled by Pisces. This is where Saturn has been anchoring you and, teaching you. And so I think with Saturn moving direct and about to pass through the final degrees of Pisces, for us that have been doing the work, we're definitely going to be, I think, feeling pretty good, like rewarded for the work that we've done. We're seeing the results. Like, I don't know if you've ever gone through this before, where you're embodying a new skill, and at first it's frustrating. It's so frustrating because you suck at it, right? But then 2 years later, let's say you practice that skill every day. In 2 years, you're like, oh my God, I am good at this. I am fluent at this. Like, I love this. It's so much more pleasurable because you've done the work, you've been consistent, you've been disciplined, and now you get to enjoy this new fluent skill that you have. And you can take it and run with it because you're now fluent at it, right? That's what I'm talking about. That's what it feels like when Saturn is moving out of a sign. Um, you've spent at least 2.5 years doing the work. We still have some time with Saturn in Pisces. Saturn's going to move out of Pisces in February 2026. So we still have the rest of 2025 to move through the last degrees of Pisces as Saturn moves direct. But we get to enjoy some of the rewards that we have put into all the work since Saturn has moved into Pisces. And I think that's a beautiful thing. There is one, I mean, there's definitely a crux that's coming with Saturn. And by crux, I mean like it's going to be it's going to be like the final lesson, and that's going to be for all of us when Saturn hits the 29th degree of Pisces, because that is a critical degree, and it's going to be the third time that Saturn crosses over that 29th degree. And the 29th degree is all about that kind of volatile state, that about, you know, transitioning from the sign of Pisces into the sign of Aries. And it's also a critical degree because it brings up like this uh, karmic completion. And Saturn's all about karma. And we've had Neptune like really hanging out at the 29th degree for a while. And there's been a lot of karma dissolving on the astral for people. People have been really releasing and dissolving a lot of systems, a lot of hierarchy, a lot of karma in their astral realms. So for the planet of karma to be at the 29th degree after all of this energy over 2025 has been like going back and forth into new cycles and then transitioning back into wrapping up old cycles, Saturn's going to be at the 29th degree. It's going to be karmic. It's going to be a karmic completion energy in February. And again, you can think of that as, a Saturnian lesson. It's going to be sobering, but if you lean into it and do the work, it's just that final lesson. And it might not be easy. It might not have that light, easy breezy feeling, but it will be rewarding to complete it. And I just see it as, for those of us that are going through a spiritual transformation, it's that final lesson that you've been dealing with for a while now. It's not like it's something new. It's something old that you're doing a final pass in. And so, like, let's say you have a pattern with, like, a narcissist and you've had a hard time with boundaries with a narcissist. Like, maybe the first time Saturn, you know, exposed you to this, you totally got taken advantage of by a narcissist. And maybe the retrograde was about learning how to actually in real time make boundaries with a narcissist. And then maybe, this final pass through, you know, this particular pattern that you have in your life is about like going no contact, with a narcissist. It's like that final lesson, you know. So that's kind of what it might feel like as Saturn hits the 29th degree. It just might be that final moment where it's like, okay, I've been exposed to this. I've been dealing with this. I've been doing the work around this. I have really come far with this, but like now I need to finalize this. And it doesn't mean it has to be negative or bad, but it might feel real. It might feel sobering. It might feel heavy. I mean, Saturn is very grounding. Then Saturn will move into Aries, and that's happening next February 2026. And Saturn in Aries is actually in its fall. And it visited Aries this year. I don't have the exact dates for that, but sometime like around the summer. I think it was like May through the summer, that Saturn was in Aries, just to give you a ballpark general time period. And then it went back into Pisces in September. So we got exposed to this energy of Saturn in Aries. Now, Saturn in Aries is in its fall, which means that it's not a good fit for Aries, essentially. It means that we're under resourced for what we need to, for the way Saturn functions in this energy of Aries. And I'll have to do a whole episode on that because I could be talking for hours, honestly, if I talk about what's happening in 2026. Like, February is a big month because Saturn moves into Aries, and then Saturn will conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees during an eclipse season. And it's just a big moment for all of us collectively. And depending on where it hits you in your chart, whether it's a direct hit or just looming in a house, it's an energy that we're all going to experience in different ways. And for some of us, it might be, very difficult depending on how it's aspecting your placements. But Saturn moving into Aries, it's kind of like when someone asks you to like cut down a tree and they give you a spoon. It's like, well, I could really use at least like an axe. That would be like Saturn being home in Capricorn, or being home in Aquarius. Like, at least you have an axe to cut down the tree. And when Saturn is exalted in Libra, it's like having a chainsaw. Like, oh, I can really cut that tree down faster. But when Saturn is in fall, um, that's like having a spoon. It's like, I don't even know if I can use a spoon. Maybe. I'll have to figure out how to push this tree over, right? It's going to take a lot more energy. It's going to take a lot more effort to get the same results. Now, Aries um, is a fire sign. It's a masculine sign, and it's a cardinal sign, which means it's all about initiating action externally. And it's all about manifesting our desires and moving through any obstacles or challenges to do that. So it's about bravery and courage, and going for what we want, and being self focused and aware of our individual desires and what we want in the world and who we are as individuals. And there's a lot that I could say about, Saturn transiting through Aries, but I want to leave it on more of a positive note for everyone, because, of course, when we talk about Saturn, we talk about hardships and difficult lessons, right? But I think the beautiful thing that Saturn gives us is foundations and systems and boundaries and structure, and having both Neptune and Saturn going into Aries, and having this conjunction, it's like the beginning of a new collective cycle spiritually, as well as like getting that grounded in physical reality. Um, and on a personal level, for those of us going through spiritual transformation, you could be aware of like a new spiritual purpose that you have, some kind of mission that you have, some kind of purpose, some kind of mission, some kind of goal, a long term goal. And this could be a real time of initiating it in your life, like really getting it started. Um, and by getting it started, I mean getting something started that could take weeks to start, months to start, years to really get launched. Because Aries is like a rocket ship that is launching, and Saturn is about building it and launching it. Building the rocket ship, putting in the energy to launch the rocket ship, and finally getting it launched. Not just initiating the process, but eventually launching it, right? And that could take time with Saturn there. And that's why it's a little bit difficult in Aries, because Aries has like short bursts of energy to initiate things. But Saturn is a planet that takes time. And so we could easily get burnt out if we're constantly putting in, the type of energy that we need to initiate something, but we have to do it long term. Like when you launch something, you put a lot of energy into it, and then you can rest, right? Once you get it started, you can let the ball and the momentum keep going. But, with Saturn there, it's almost asking for consistency, showing up consistently, initiating a lot of things consistently. If there's an obstacle or a challenge in our way, we can't stop. We have to move through it. We have to be courageous and move through it. So there are definitely some challenges with Saturn in Aries. We're all going to feel it. We're all going to feel a little bit under resourced in that area of our lives. But again, when you do the work, it really pays off. And so it's like having a brand new spiritual cycle. It's like buying a piece of land and starting to, have a concept and starting to have a vision and starting to get the design process started for building a custom home, on that piece of land. It's like you position where the house is going to be, you start, having the concept of what you need for that house, how you want to design that house. You start drafting, the house. You go through the permitting process, then you start building it, then you got to deal with all the issues of building it, and then finally by the time you're done, you have a house. So that's the kind of energy we're dealing with Saturn. We're initiating something new. It's new territory in our lives. And we have to embody it. We have to do it. We have to launch it. We have to build it. We got to launch it. And that's what we're moving into. So I actually think it's pretty exciting, especially those of us that, are conscious beings. We're so ready for a new spiritual cycle to occur on the planet. We've been hanging out in just a very old spiritual cycle. And now having Neptune go back into Aries means like we're firmly starting this brand new spiritual collective cycle again. It's going to have to go through 12 zodiac signs to complete its whole cycle. And that takes lots and lots of years. So it's actually a really exciting time on Earth. It's probably why, some of our generations are here right now. Why we reincarnated was for this time on Earth. We've been leading up to it, and now we actually are stepping into it. And I think for us on a personal level, it's going to be really cool to start seeing the physical results being initiated and launched in your own life. So that's all I'm going to say about Saturn stationing direct on November 27th. It's going to take all the way till March 26th for Saturn to finally pass over 1 degree in Aries, and then it's going to be transiting through degrees that it hasn't transited through in Aries. And so I think it's really not going to be until the springtime in 2026 where we actually start to feel like we're moving into new territory in our lives. Until then, we are wrapping up an old cycle, moving into a new one, and hopefully taking it in stride, reminding ourselves to take deep breaths, to trust the process, to believe in ourselves, and to continue to do the work with what Saturn brings us. And I wish you all the best with that. If you are interested in getting a reading, maybe you have a birthday coming up and you want a solar return reading, that's like a birthday gift for yourself to look at some of the energy dynamics that are occurring for your next year, some of the events that might happen over the next year. If you have not studied your natal chart and you want to go deeper into your natal chart or learn more about your natal chart, you can schedule a natal chart reading. If you're going through some transits, especially difficult transits with Chiron, the wounded healer, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, some of the outer planets, any difficult transit that you're going through, that's a really good time to get a reading as well, an astrology reading, because you can kind of look at what's happening, some of the timelines, really lean into some of the energies that are going to support you. So, yeah, if you need help with healing, you know who to call. I'm your psychic bestie over here, help give you clarity, relief, and empowerment. So you can find more information in the description box. And again, I will see you next time. Wish you the best. Take care.